You forgot about that. Chair, I can confirm you're now live on YouTube.
Okay, right. Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. And thanks very much indeed, everybody, for attending this afternoon. The Democratic Services Officer will now conduct a roll call to check who is present at today's meeting. When she calls out your name, could you please switch your microphone on and confirm your attendance by answering present. So could you please conduct the roll call?
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Banbridge. Present. Councillor Bone. Councillor Collop. Jacob. Councillor Esconnett. Present. Councillor Hudson, we haven't got yet. Councillor Jones.
Present.
Councillor Kemp might be a few minutes late because I think she's coming back from county. Councillor Rust.
Present.
Councillor Tyler.
Present.
Councillor Wilkinson. And we've got by invitation Councillor Middleton.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We have also with us this afternoon the following officers who are present. That's John Dreamer, who's the management team representative, and also Michelle Drury, who's the Assistant Director of Resources, and she's attending the meeting via Zoom this afternoon. There she is. Yeah, thank you. And we have also Councillor Graham Middleton, who has been invited to the meeting today for item 8. So thank you, Graham. And ma'am, please remind members that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live via the YouTube. So by attending this meeting, you are giving your permission to be recorded and streamed. Okay. Now I'm going to ask our Democratic Services Officer to advise me or us of any apologies received today.
Okay, apologies received from Councillor Dickinson, Councillor Howman, Councillor Joyce and Councillor Lowe.
Many thanks indeed. Now, I will move on then to item 2, which is the minutes of our previous meeting. And I'm going to ask you all if you agree the minutes of the previous meeting, which were held on June 28th. Can we agree them, everyone? Yeah, seems unanimous, yeah. Thank you for that. I have to ask you also if there are any interests to declare this afternoon, please. No, not as far as we know. Thank you very much. I have to inform the committee that I haven't any urgent business that I've received up to now. So I will also, as far as I can see, we don't this afternoon have any members present under Standing Order 34. Okay, so now we move on to item 6. Again, Chair's my correspondence, I haven't any this afternoon. So in that case, we can now move on to our main items of business this afternoon. And the first one is item 7, which is the Special Expenses Monitoring Report. And Michelle Drury will present the report. And the report has been published as a supplementary document today. I will, after the presentation, ask for questions, and then we'll go on from there. So can I hand over then to Michelle? Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So you have the report that's presented to you today is the outturn from the budget monitoring position for the special expenses covering the Kings Lynn area for the financial year 2020-21. The recommendation is for you to consider the contents of the report. So within the report, it does set out that special expenses are charged for a number of areas, and these will include things like footway lighting, play areas, community centres, pavilions, dog bins, and some recent parish partnership traffic calming measures that were put in place. So at section 1.4, we have set out what the special expenses charge for the 2020-21 was for each of those areas, and it is broken down by the different activity. And the total charge was 500,370. There was a small element of council tax support grant that was budgeted for at £7,050. So it meant that the net total that would be charged through special expenses would be £493,320. Against the tax base of 10,672, this meant that the Band D charge was calculated at 46.23 per tax base. So section 2 of the report sets out the position as at the end of year. So the outturn came to 505,150. So an overspend of 4,780 against each of those different specific areas. The report does set out the different variances, and it does also give an indication as to the cause of those variances. So I'll just focus on those variances for now. So for footway lighting, that was underspent by 1,650. This was because there was a lower cost per unit of both electricity and maintenance costs that fed through when that was apportioned against all footway lighting sites. However, it is noted that energy costs are due to rise above the general rate of inflation, which you have all seen in media recently. So we will need to consider those as part of setting the special expenses budget for 22-23. Play area costs have increased, and this is because of an increase in maintenance costs. This was because of COVID restrictions, that some of that activity had to be increased to put special measures in place to allow health and safety around the COVID containment of COVID. Sorry. For community centres, there was an underspend of 7,650. This was mainly because of a result of lower staffing costs that were being recharged back to the centres through the pandemic. However, at Fairstead Community Centre, there was some increases in rates and maintenance costs because that centre is quite old, but those were offset by a reduction in maintenance and rates costs at Southland Community Centre. What should also be noted is that within those costs, there was the transfer to reserves of 20,000, which you will recall was agreed as part of the savings at the Southland Community Centre, which would contribute towards the capital scheme for the play areas. So that capital scheme is costed at 50,000. So 20,000 of the underspend at Southland Community Centre is contributing towards that. So allotment costs, there's been an underspend or savings there of 6,200. And again, this is a reduction in activity which has occurred during the pandemic. The reduction in costs are mainly from maintenance costs, water supplies and material costs. Bus shelter is where the significant cost is coming from. So these have previously been covered by a reserve, but that reserve has now been fully utilised. So within that area, there is expected income that comes from advertising or sponsorship around the bus shelters. And because of COVID, that no income was achieved during last year in that area. And again, we'll need to consider that as part of the estimates for 2020 to 23 budget. However, I have been assured that there has been activity around that sponsorship in the current year, but I'm just waiting to see the income that has been achieved so far. At the next CLAC, we will be bringing the estimates around the budgets for discussion, and we'll also include, where we can, some monitoring, which will inform some of that discussion that we have with you. So as you will be aware, we can't determine over and underspends when we set the budget. There is always a risk that it might go one way or the other. So for the overspend for 2021 on special expenses, the council does meet that, and we'll now undertake the work to understand what that implication is on the monitoring position and the estimated budget for next year, and we'll come back to you next month with the outcome of that. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an explanation, but I'll hand over for any questions, and I will endeavour to answer them as best I can today, but I may need to revert back to my finance team and come back to you following the meeting for a comprehensive answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And I see that we've, thank you for that presentation. We do look forward, obviously, to the details and so on next time. And I'd like to ask now Councillor Rust for her question, please.
Thank you. Michelle, you've said that the rates have increased at Fairstead Community Centre because of the age of the building, but I don't understand how rates can change. I thought rates were just set. And
no, sorry,
the Southland Community Centre saying that there's a reduction in the rates. I didn't think it varied. Could you help me understand?
Sorry, in terms of the community centre, it's probably the maintenance costs that was due to the age of the building. So there has been an increase in rates for Fairstead. So obviously when we bring the estimate or the budget to you, which is normally around the October-November time, we wouldn't have the confirmed rates at that time. So there is always likely to be a change between what's actually charged in rates to what has been budgeted for because of the timing. But it is actually the maintenance cost which is due to the age of the building. So because more repairs have been required because of that.
Okay, Councillor Rust. Yeah. I think I have Councillor Sandra Collett next. Sandra.
Thank you, Chair. Michelle, regarding the bus shelters, I thought that the College of West Anglia were contributing, put posters in the bus shelters to give us some income. Can you confirm this, please, or not?
I understand that they are our key contributor to that, and from the conversation I had today, we have been working with them to do that in the current financial year. So there is expected to be income generated from that in the current financial year, but obviously that activity wasn't undertaken last financial year because of COVID, and I guess because the college would have been closed for significant parts of the year as well, that they weren't seeking to do that advertising around that. But it is my assumption on that, I will say, so I wouldn't want to take that verbatim, but that is my assumption in terms of the lack of activity last year, but it certainly is back on track this year. So
I have Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Bambridge.
Thank you, Chair. Slightly different. I'd like to know the timing and the cost of the repairs to bus shelters. I've gone through the members' inquiry quite a few weeks ago. I've sent the photographs in of the damage and I've heard nothing. So is there an allowance set here to one side for the repair to the shelters if something happens to them, please?
Okay, I will have to go back and follow that one up separately, and that query hasn't come or been fed through to me, so I will follow that up and come back to you separately outside this meeting. if that's okay.
John would like to make a quick comment about that. Margaret?
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, I'll just, it's probably right whereabouts that query has gone. Do you know who you sent it to, Councillor Wilkinson? Oh, to members' inquiry, yeah. So I said that may well, Michelle, have gone to Peter Gray. But we'll chase that down for you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. Councillor Banbridge, Leslie?
This isn't for Michelle's bit really, but just talk as we were talking about the bus shelters. I don't understand why we're not using them to promote the events on the summer events, because so many people don't know that the event's on. So could it be noted so that it can be passed on to whoever is in charge of the events?
Martin Chisholm.
That will be Martin Chisholm.
I know it's Martin Chisholm, yeah, but perhaps they could be used for promoting them, because there are a few more people this Sunday, but some of the events have been very poorly attended. I would like to ask another question, if I may, Chairman. We've got some SAMs in Vancouver Avenue, and there are 4 places or 3 places. I've got a map somewhere, I couldn't find it the other day, but where the SAMs are along Tennyson Road. The person that decided he was going to take charge of them, when I was on that little group doing the speed awareness raising, has not been able to use the batteries any longer, because they have gone and we need new batteries. Where would we get that income from for the batteries? And really it needs somebody that's going to look after them, because he's now moving. So that it's not, I'm sorry to bring it up at this stage, but we talk about SAMs, and if we were going to do them elsewhere, it's something to be borne in mind, that the public is expected to look after them and recharge the batteries.
Yeah, probably I can take this one to a certain extent, and I'm looking at Councillor Rust over there, because there's a more recent SAM that we've put in place in your area, haven't we? And the point about, I don't think the batteries are that expensive. I did check with Michelle, because in theory the cost would have to come through the special expenses, but I think the cost is fairly negligible, and there aren't hundreds of these schemes. So I think between us as officers, we can probably work that out. It's not going to break the bank, albeit that, of course, there are, there is this whole budget is tight. But for Councillor Rust, what I've said is that I will find a budget for it and do it, and I'll do the same for you. I'll find a community safety budget, because we're talking about small amounts of money for quite an important scheme. I will mention when we talk in a little bit, and Councillor Middleton's going to add some comments as well about future schemes and how we have to factor the maintenance in. And I think the North County Council kind of require that now in the application. So we have to give that a bit more thought going forward, all of us. But if you've got an immediate problem, if you let me know, I can, I've already asked Joe, if you don't mind me, I've already asked for the additional stuff, some clips that you've put the order in, and I'll chase that up, so I can add anything that you need from the company as necessary.
Yeah, I mean, he says they're unusable. I've just double checked his email, which was 24th of August. He says they're unusable, but it is, he's moving, as I say, so we need somewhere that they can be charged up as well. And I can't climb up a ladder and put them back. So, I mean, that's another factor to think about, a bit of maintenance on that. Thank you, John. Thank you.
If I could just butt in and say, I absolutely support Councillor Banbridge with regard to the advertising of events and so on. I think it's so important that as much publicity is given to these events as is possible, all relating to getting people to the events and to the town centre. I was a little bit disappointed to see quite a few shops that are actually trading not a million miles away from here, as I came past to come to this meeting, several closed. I don't mean closed because they were gone out of business. I mean closed presumably because there wasn't a lot of business. We're talking 4:15 this afternoon. So anything connected, anything that can get people in the town, getting to the events, I absolutely agree. And I absolutely agree with Councillor Bambridge on that.
Yeah. Kathy will have noted that, and we'll ask Martin. Is that okay, Kathy? Yeah.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for all your comments, and thank you. Hello, Councillor. Yeah, Bowen is here. Right. Yeah. Graham, you want to have a word? Graham Middleton.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you mind if I ask a couple of questions? Obviously, I don't sit on the committee anymore, but hopefully my thoughts might help a couple of things. Is that all right?
Yeah, please go ahead, Graham. Yes.
Michelle, just for clarification to start with, just before I ask my question, 1.4. The last sentence in that paragraph says the table below details the special expenses charge 1819, and then below it actually says charge 2021. So should that be 18?
Yeah, sorry, that is a clerical error on my part.
Okay,
so
that's fine. And then the
I've
outrun,
obviously, a previous report.
And then under 2.1, obviously outrun 2021. So this is up until, just to clarify, it's just up until April of this year. So that's a completed year. Yeah. Okay. So a couple of the questions I've got, just looking at these sums in variance to the year previous, because I mean, just to add a bit of context, I think one of the big challenges when I was on CLAC as a Kings Lynn council was always trying to identify areas of special expenses where the committee can maybe save a little bit and then have an input to be able to do some decision making and point it in the right direction. Just a couple of things to query. So, for instance, one thing to query is the public conveniences, which were shut for the best part of that 2021 year, although the charge to special expenses has been the same as the previous year, whereas they were closed. So just to clarify in terms of the outrun of what the expenditure has been when they have been shut is one question. Another one with regards to the community centres, obviously I understand a saving has been made because a staff saving, I take it that's from Alive. However, I believe I'm right in saying for a large chunk of the last 18 months, the council has been using Southland Community Centre specifically as staffing space. So therefore, obviously understand the council's bank account is all one bank account in the grand scheme of things. However, obviously the people of Kings Lynn have been charged £35,900, but then the council itself were in effect, you could say, renting the space within the community centre to house its own staff. So will there be any saving or, dispersion of one pot to another? Was the council paying, I suppose the question is, was the council paying to use those centres? And in which case, is there a saving with regards to the people of Kings Lynn paying out nearly £36,000 for the upkeep of those? And then also with regards to a couple of these things, and it's already been mentioned around the bus shelters. I know when I was on CLAC, we'd done a piece of work about the advertising on the bus shelters, which used to get done by a company that then got took in-house by the borough. And I remember we had a policy or a paper come through CLAC that was, how can we utilise and make some money out of these because we're all paying to maintain them. Where on here does it include income from some of these things? For instance, the community centres, the allotments and the bus shelters, and any savings on the public conveniences. Because obviously a lot of these things weren't used. And it just surprises me that there was only a nearly £5,000 saving from one year to the next when we was using one of the community centres, and specifically the public conveniences were not in operation for a long period of that time.
Yeah, so public conveniences, I will have to follow up. So I take on board the point that it was closed for a period of time. However, when the public conveniences were open, they have required a lot more intervention and activity to keep them clean in line with the COVID measures that have been put in place. But I will need to go back and follow that one up. With the Southland Community Centre, yes, you're right. We have had some staff that have been based there. And that has meant that we have not passported on the cost of those to or through special expenses, which has resulted in a significant saving. And £20,000 of that saving has been transferred to reserves to put towards the play areas, so the 50,000 capital budget that was set up to accommodate the play area. So that's where that savings has come from. So instead of the community paying for the use of that community centre, that saving has contributed towards the play equipment that will be installed across the area instead. And the bus shelters, there is a budgeted income within that bus shelter line. So there are a number of lines within there which will deal with all the expenses as well as any income or contributions. So in the last financial year, there was a contribution from reserves, and there was also a budgeted contribution in terms of this sponsorship funding. So the contribution from reserves, so all of the remaining reserves was used up. So that's why it says in the report that that is now depleted. And then because no income was derived from sponsorship or marketing, that feeds into that line as well. So that's why there's a 15,000 overspend against that, because those income levels were not achieved either through lack of reserves or no sponsorship income. So I hope that makes sense in terms of how those figures are arrived at. But I'll certainly go back and follow up the public conveniences one just to provide some clarity on that. But I am aware a bit more of the detail behind the other two.
Yes, John, yes.
Yeah, just quickly, Councillor Middleton, when we talk about the play areas in a minute, I'll mention about the 20,000 then. Yeah.
Okay, is that okay, Graham? Yeah, no worries. On this particular item, item 7, do I have any more questions, or do we have any more questions? No? Thank you for that then, everybody. We'll move on then, as John has just mentioned, to item 8, which is the update on play enhancements. And John will update us on the play area enhancements, and we should have some visuals there. And then afterwards, as usual, the committee is invited to ask questions of John. So hope for the best here, John.
Okay. I think something's going to come up on the screen. Michelle, are you still there? Because I might need you just for a little bit on this item.
I am still here in the background.
I think probably after that, you'd be okay to go, would you say, Kathy? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think we'll be okay in that respect. But yeah, just what we've got here is, this isn't, if you recall, Nathan Johnson reported at the last CLAC in some detail about the play area, and we thought it'd be useful to just give a little update. So this is Nathan's update, but rather than asking Nathan to attend every time, he's sent the update, which Kathy's trying to put up on the screen, and I'll do that for him. So of course I'll be a little bit limited in terms of some. If there are questions, I can take them back to Nathan. That's not a problem. I'll do my best.
Thank you, John.
I'll just start off because I don't need the screen for this bit, and this will answer hopefully part of Graham's. Sorry, Graham, Councillor Middleton. Apologies. It's formal, informal. I don't always get it right. So £50,000 was in the capital budget, and Michelle, jump in if I get any of the finances wrong, for the play area. There was £30,000 originally that was carried forward from a previous year, and 20,000 extra due to Southland, that's capital funds, due to the Southland Community Centre not being operational. And as you know, there are staff in there. In fact, one of my teams, the Housing Standards team, are currently there at the moment. So what we thought at the time was that rather than, we needed to keep an eye on Southland, and it had to kind of lean towards Southland, but of course it's paid for by all of King's Lynn. So we thought that the 50,000 would be there to benefit all of King's Lynn. This is we've gone through all this at the last couple of claps. So this is bringing us up to date. So bottom line is we had 50,000. What Nathan has done is he has effectively spent £43,000 of that. And the £43,000 probably be useful to show the pictures and the maps if we do that now, and then I'll carry on after that. So here we have a nice picture for Queen Elizabeth play area. So, and then following that, we'll go through them all, and then we can always come back if we get a query. So the second one should be a plan of that, of Queen Elizabeth. So anybody knows that area? There it is. Yep. The third one should be Southland Community Centre, if I'm right. We're testing Kathy's pressing abilities here, aren't we? So there's Southland. So there's a few things there. Something called a Winnipeg, which I thought was a city in Canada. So there's a few bits and pieces there. You'll all, I'll rush through this because you would have seen this. And then the fourth one should be the map stroke plan of that one. And that's that. Councillor Kemp, you'll hopefully recognise the site there. And then the third one, West Lynn. And again, we'll start off with the pictures of the stuff. Yeah. And then a plan to follow. So £43,000 has been spent on that, plus what the previous spend, which we've talked about before, which was some repairs to the Wisbeach Road area. So that kind of brings us up to date. So I'm just reading my notes from what Nathan has reported. He also has available to him some funding from the developer for the Raby Avenue. Is Raby Avenue, Edmund Street, is that one area or is that two separate areas? Those who know that area? Yeah. It's Councillor Bone over there, isn't it? You asked the question, didn't you? I think directly to Nathan. So I don't have an update on that. Did he reply to you? No.
I did ask him full council with regards to that development, when that development in place, that the money, 30 grand, I think, was to be allocated for the improvements that park. I'm 47 years old, and those play equipment is still the play equipment when I was a child, so it desperately needs updating. And obviously, we didn't push for that because we was relying on the money coming from that development.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, what Councillor Bone's referring to is for those of you who were paying attention to full council. So this is outside of what we're talking about, but worth discussing because it's obviously enhancements to play areas, but from a separate funding source that appears to be ongoing. If you've asked a question at full council, that should go through the process of being answered. But if there's anything additional, and obviously chase up Nathan and copy me in, and I can chase that as well. And we'll note on the minutes that you've asked the question. But that's where we are. There is I think Nathan's report, the tender has gone out, been approved to a company, and there is a 10-week delay for the installation there. And that's probably it as far as what I know. If anybody's got any questions, I'll try and answer them, or we can note them and ask Nathan if he can pick them up another time.
Councillor Sandra Collett was just first, and then Alex was next. And yep, did you? No, okay. And were there any two? Sorry, those two councillors I've just mentioned. Did I miss anybody else at the moment?
No, thank you. My question was answered.
Okay, so Councillor Sandra Collett first, then.
John, you said there was a 10-week hold up with these equipment. Have you got any idea when it should be installed, please?
All I've got is 10 weeks from Nathan. I don't know when. I mean, the email he sent. Oh, hang on, we might have a more of an update because the answers I don't know. But Councillor Russ,
I thought he said that they would be fitted in November. Yeah.
Okay.
Michelle, do you want to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he did say that it would be around the mid to the end of November. So it's a 10-week lead time.
Okay, that's lovely, thanks.
Thanks, Sandra. Okay, and then Alex?
Well, my question was exactly the same I was going to ask, but that's been answered. So thank you. So that will definitely be there at the end of November. Are you doing any preparatory groundworks as well first? You said your people were there today. Where did you mean? Or did I not get the wrong end of the stick? You said something about people being there on site today, but obviously they're not installing the equipment.
No, I don't think I said that.
No.
I don't know about the groundworks. I mean, I think we ought to just sort of, there's been some progress here. It's good. I think we can ask, I know it's a particular, the November meeting is for a particular reason, but we could ask for a quick update from Nathan Johnson then. Perhaps Kathy, if we could just ask for a couple of lines, and then perhaps for the first one in the new year, Nathan can come along and attend and talk us through what's been done and where we are, because there should be a bit more progress then. Do you think that's, yeah?
Yeah, Francis, Councillor Bone, yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tyler. Here's a supplementary to my question I put forward to Nathan with regards to Edmund Street, with regards to suggestions for the next round when we can do these. I've had people suggest that we would benefit from an adults gyms type thing situated in the walks. It's more central. Loke Road Playground have something very similar, and it's been recommended that we had something similar in the walks, which would be ideally situated near the Mugger. When can we have next?
I think what we probably need to do, just thinking off the top of my head, is we had a working group, a member and officer working group looking at a subgroup, and I think we need to get that going again, and we could then pick up new ideas as well. And it would be useful, I think, to invite somebody from the NHS, from the CCG, which is part of the NHS, to come along to that as well, because they're interested in schemes, and I'm going to ask them to come along and talk to CLAC as soon as that can be arranged, because they're looking at schemes to improve health and fitness within our community, because you probably know through COVID some of the infection rates were quite high in this area, particularly early on. And I think the CCG, as we move into the recovery phase, want to look at improving the fitness and health of our population. So we can talk about that then. But I think, Kathy, if we can get the subgroup up and coming again, because you're on that, aren't you? And whether we need to change the membership, but let's get that meeting again, and we can look at the new schemes, new ideas. And Michelle, we probably need to have you on that because of the financial side of it.
Is that okay?
I think Leslie wants.
Yeah, I have Leslie, and I have Leslie. Was there anybody else after Leslie, so that we can move on? No. Okay, Leslie, please go ahead.
We wanted one of those outdoor exercises areas once before, but we've got the awful parkour instead, which is only used by very few people. It's very ugly for the walks, and it's used more as somewhere for students to sit on and leave all their rubbish behind during the day.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good idea. There is also the bit along the side of Seven Sisters that might be a possibility as well as an area.
I think these are good points that have been made. So thank you very much for those, everybody. Correctly, then we are in a position, unless John's got anything to interject, to move on.
I mean, hopefully it's seen as a positive thing, and well done. And thank you to everybody that's been involved. This is something that we can do for our young people. So we need to note that it's a good thing. Yeah, but there's more to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, John, for that. And Michelle, yeah, did you want to say something, or did you?
I just wanted to add, because no one's asked what's happening with the rest of the funding. So 43,000 has been committed to these play areas, but in addition to the equipment that you've been shown on the maps or pictures, there is also going to be bins and benches installed at each of the sites. So where it was referred to in terms of rubbish all over the site and lack of appropriate seating, I think that it would be resolved by these additions in each of the play areas as well. So, so the funding is fully committed in that respect.
Yeah, that sounds positive, and I'm a one, as long as it's appropriate, I'm very much a one for public seating myself. So yeah, thanks very much then. Well, thank you everybody. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, John, and everybody for contributions to item 8. Very important, and something I know that we give seriousness to. Right, everybody, and we'll move on then to item 9, which is Parish Partnership Scheme Initiative 2022-23. And we've been invited to submit bids again to the Parish Partnership Scheme for the financial year 22-23. The closing date for submissions will be December 10th, but any scheme will be considered at the special expenses meeting, which is now scheduled for November the 11th. I'm now going to, if he would, invite Graham, Councillor Middleton.
Can I just before?
Yes.
If I could just set the scene
yes,
for
please,
it.
Please, John.
I'll do it really quickly.
Oh, yes, you're okay.
I thought I'd had a look at the letter, and you can all obviously read that, can't you? And it makes sense. I thought if I just highlight the main points, that might be helpful, because it is a fairly straightforward scheme, I would hope. So, apologies if I'm teaching some of you to suck eggs, but it's a 50-50 basis. Norfolk County Council fund half if approved, and then it's up to the ward to find the rest. Decided in March, as Councillor Tyler said, December the 10th is the date for received. You can see the kind of things that are permitted within there. So just examples, small footways, crossings, small additions, or where there's a gap in a public right-of-way or an improvement to a public right-of-way, flashing 20-mile-an-hour speed signs, keep clear markings, but where they are unlikely to be successful is where traffic regulation orders are required, because they have to be applied for separately. Bus shelters, as you know about, and Peter Gray is the person following the previous work done by CLAC. Peter Gray is the person to go to in terms of sorting out advice that's required for that. All of them must be self-contained ideas, so if they rely on other things, then obviously that causes a problem, because for the approval to be done, you can't be waiting for something else. There's a list of things on the letter that can't be considered, which is things like lighting, speed limits, weight limits, and as I said, anything that requires a traffic regulation order. If there is something that requires that order, that's got to be applied for separately, direct through to the county council. So there's information on the letter as well as what to include, and the emphasis here is for all of you guys to do the work. You need to talk to your county councillor as well, talk to any local groups in the area, list what the objectives are, the details, the costs, any what contribution is required, any plans, maps, and any other information, including local support. And as we mentioned earlier about any maintenance that's required, Councillor Bambridge mentioned that. Nowadays, the county would like to see that that's been factored in or thought about beforehand. So taking that, I'll paraphrase, it's all on the letter. If anybody is needing any help, I can help. I don't have a huge amount of time, but I'm more than happy if anybody's stuck, providing the member is prepared to do the work. But if it's a technical query, I can liaise with the county council. Please ask, and I'll know where to go. Michelle, are you still on the call? Are you?
I am.
Yeah. Just before Councillor Middleton speaks, the funding is important because 50% of the funding has to be found by the ward, and as Councillor Middleton said, it's the council's bank account. It has to be found within the special expenses, and the money within that is tight. I don't know if Michelle, if you just want to give a quick word on that, and then after that I'm done, and then Councillor Middleton can perhaps talk about some alternative ways in which we could look for funding sources in that respect. Michelle.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think in terms of the monitoring report, which I presented to you earlier, you could see that there are some areas which have the potential to be overspent or require additional budget when we come to look at setting the budget for 22-23. So we will need to give them some careful consideration. Also in respect of closed churchyards, I understand that there has been increases in repairs in respect of health and safety costs that have come through to the council to pick up across various closed churchyards, which under legislation we are able to pass those costs on through special expenses to parish and town councils. If any of those do fall within the Kings Lynn area, then that obviously will also create additional costs that we weren't anticipating. So we need to undertake a review internally to see what costs have arisen in respect of those repairs that have come up in last year and the current year, and what the implications are, and whether any of those will fall on the Kings Lynn area. But we'll pick those up and set those out in the budget setting report that we bring back to you in November anyway. So we'll be able to have that discussion with you about how to manage those costs if any of those arise in this area. But it's just really to set out that there are, for me, some issues of concern in terms of the budget going forward. Some of that may be eliminated by an increase in the council tax base, but I haven't had any of those figures come through to me yet. But nevertheless, they'll probably only be small in comparison to budget increases. You may recall that under government legislation, they set out what we are able to increase our council tax by. And in recent years, that's been a £5 limit. And the council's policy has been to split that as £4.50 for council cost increases and 50p for special expenses. In the budget setting round for 21-22, we did exceed that 50p limit across all the special expenses. So we did have to make an adjustment before we could set the council tax precept. So it's just to forewarn you and make you aware of those issues, and we will have to consider those as part of the overall finances going forward. But hopefully I'll have some information which we can have proper discussion and debate around those at the next meeting. But it's just really to make you aware that we might not have any spare capacity to support schemes such as this one at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michelle, for that. That's helpful. If all is well, Councillor Middleton Graham, if you could share your wisdom, please.
No worries. Well, thanks very much for that, and thanks for inviting me along. Obviously, I mentioned it at full council. Feels like an age ago now. So much has happened in the last few months. In terms of ways in which, and I'm sitting, what I will add is I'm sitting here today as county councillor rather than borough councillor, to bring forward just a suggestion from my side, and obviously for the committee to think about how that can be utilised. Now, as you'll all know, as county councillors, we get a highways budget every year. This year that increased to £10,000 a year from £6,000 that it's been for the previous 4 years. Now that's 10,000 per councillor, and obviously the Kings Lynn unparished area covers 3 of us in its entirety. So that's myself, obviously Leslie, and now Rob Colwell, and obviously Alex sort of crosses in between a little bit of both. Yeah. So essentially, what that does mean is that over the course of every year, that's 30,000 or minimum of 30,000, and whatever you can get out of Alex. which will be spent on highways type improvements across that unparished area of Kings Lynn, or potentially 112, minimum £120,000 over 4 years, which is quite a lot of money, really, considering how condensed, obviously, the county divisions are. And I know that prior to the election, a great example of where I did sit as a county councillor, which was Gayton and Nar Valley, where I had 13 parishes in all, although some of them were part parishes, where my £6,000 then had to be spread out. So all of a sudden, by the time you filled up a few potholes and maybe gave someone a bit of contribution towards clearing a trod, all of a sudden that money had disappeared. Now, obviously, as you're doing this piece of work and getting your head around the ongoing parish partnership scheme, one of the ways in which you can get contributions towards some schemes in the parish partnership is to approach your county councillor and ask for contributions towards it. So things that I have done in the past, and I know Alex has done the same, is things like SAM2 signs, where they cost around about, I think, 3,700 roughly. I had approaches from parishes before where they'd get 50% of that from the parish partnership scheme, where the county council would put in a quarter and potentially the parish council would stump up a quarter. But obviously they become a lot cheaper, and that money can be spread out. Now, myself sitting here today is purely a sort of an offer for assistance from you, but then some joint up working together, is that obviously I don't have any parish councils. So where previously, and Alex will know, you've constantly got a parish council who will jivvy you along and give you some pointers in terms of what that money can be spent on. Obviously, I don't have any of those. So I would welcome any suggestions from this committee in terms of replacing the role of that parish or town council for anything that comes forward. Now, what I would add, and I think it's really important to add, is that I purely speak for myself, and it will be up to the committee to communicate with the other 3 county councillors. What I would sort of emphasise as well is these are member budgets. So my offer here isn't to ask you to spend the 10,000 for me, but is purely if you've got anything coming forward, then feel free to approach me and ask for a contribution. And like I say, as it's a member's budget, if I agree and think it's a good idea, then I'll put some money towards it. And naturally, if I don't, or I've decided to contribute it towards something else, then obviously that pot is limited. And I would say that needs to obviously be the same for the other county councillors as well. I don't think it's my role to offer you Leslie's 10,000, and obviously it's not potentially this committee's role to dictate to Leslie or Alex or Rob or myself in terms of what that money potentially can be spent on. I think the only other thing from me as well is that I'm quite keen that my 10,000 is spent within my division, which obviously pretty much includes everything off of Wootton Road from the top to the bottom, is the easiest way of explaining it. So anything across Reffley or the Grange estate, I would welcome schemes to come forward. From my position, I'm not overly keen on chucking it into something which is maybe one area of Kings Lynn, which gobbles everybody's allowance up. But anyway, that offer of, if you come up with anything, if you've got any ideas through the parish partnership scheme, then there is some budget, with sort of my nod available, that if over the course of this year and the next sort of 3 years, really, if you've got anything come forward that can be contributed, then feel free to approach me, send me an email, invite me along to the meeting to discuss it, and let's work together to make sure that money is spent, because it's there to be spent. So let's make sure it gets spent in Kings Lynn. But feel free for any questions, and Leslie's had her hand up. She might want to add towards that.
Don't ask for any of mine. It's nearly all spent on pavements. And I'm also looking at residents parking, so it will all go next year as well.
Oh, thanks for letting us know, Leslie. That's handy.
Councillor Middleton, your 10,000 that you get, does that differ to what we can actually have with the parish partnership, or is it basically the same things?
No, as far as I'm aware, it's two completely different schemes. So the parish partnership is, I think, about 300,000 that the county council allocate towards parish partnership. That, to be honest, there's various things in the parish partnership scheme that you can bid for through that scheme that the highways budget isn't eligible to contribute towards. But anything with regards to highways, and that can be anything from public right of way, and it might be that there's a trod that needs the hedge trimming back and it hasn't been done for a long time, or it might be that there's a series of potholes. Sort of thing I used on before was, if there's a pothole which isn't considered to be important in terms of how long it's going to take to do it, by going in and spending your members' allowance, it sort of gets done pretty quickly, because it's the member saying, putting that budget on the table. But it's two completely different things. So, like I say, you could apply for, I think, up to 75% of a scheme through parish partnership. I or whoever can put some of the 25% left, which means potentially out of whatever budget in special expenses or the borough council has got to contribute towards that as well, might actually mean that the borough or the special expenses is paying a small, 5 or 10% of the overall 100%, and the rest of it will get funded. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Probably just worth adding, I think it's 50-50 rather than 75-25. Am I right, Kathy? I think, yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Graham. Thank you very much for clarification there. Members, are there any other questions to Graham, or any other questions that any John or anyone else can answer before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to say that, of course, the parish partnership scheme originally only applied to the parishes, the villages, and I fought and got it extended to the unparished area in 2015 at the County Council. And what I would say, there is a potential for bigger schemes, which I sort of know to my cost, because the first 2 years of my budget was spent nearly entirely on a traffic scheme with a traffic order for Vancouver Avenue, which now isn't in the division or in the ward. But that was something agreed with the next, the neighbouring division, which was quite important. So there is a scope for bigger schemes, should they be needed. But of course, you get far more money out of things, far more out of the money if you're looking at
your money and Thomas Smith's money paid for the legal side of it all.
Yes,
not for the actual.
No, you're right, because a traffic order costs a lot of money. It's just the paperwork. But obviously there was a scheme which happened, and that was quite important. And there were SAM signs involved as well, the HGV restriction. So that is potentially possible. What I'm saying is it would take a lot of money, and you get more bang for your buck by going for things like bus shelters or small trods or SAM signs. So that is something to consider, but obviously there are pros and cons for it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Councillor Kemp. Just trying to speak openly, we, last couple of years, it's been bus shelters and SAM signs. I haven't seen anything in terms of improving any public rights of way. So that might be worth people having to think about some of the footpaths and whether there could be any improvements in that respect. If there's, dead ends or where footpaths, I think Councillor Middleton said about a hedge getting in the way. I know myself on the coastal footpath, because not so many people have walked it. Parts of it are overgrown near Holme, and obviously the parish will get on top of that at some point, but there may be some areas of footpaths that need a bit of a look at. So it'd be worthwhile you talking to your groups and people who you know in your area about what the state of the local footpaths are, because we haven't had anything along that line for a little while. But that's just me speaking. It's not for me to say. I'm just sort of trying to plant seeds. Yeah.
Any suggestion from anybody is very welcome, John. Yeah. So, but thanks for that. Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions on this before we move on? Then, okay. So thanks for that, everybody. Again, important stuff to improve our communities. I'll move on then to item 10, which is the committee's work programme and the Cabinet Forward Decision List. So I have to ask you if you would consider, as always, if you would consider items for our work programme. And I would ask you all to note the Cabinet's forward decision list. And I've always said, and I say at almost every meeting, that whether you contact John, Kathy or myself, we're always, or even John Collop here, our Vice Chairman, always happy to receive and consider your items for the work programme. It's important that your communities are issues are discussed and hopefully improved upon. And the date of the next meeting, this is item 11, as I mentioned earlier, is the special expenses meeting on November the 11th, the 11th of the 11th, and it's at 4:30 here in the Assembly Room at Town Hall. Unless there's anything else from I know there isn't any other business item, but unless there is anything else from anybody, I will at 5:30 p.m. close the meeting then. Thank you very much for your attendance and your future good work. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, cheerio.
Thanks, everyone.